One of the hottest topics in the NHL right now is who the Montreal Canadiens will land at number 5, and with a lot of Habs fans from day one saying they wanted Kaiden, Lindstrom, there have been a lot of reports coming out recently, more and more, saying that while Lindstrom might be a good fit, a top talent might slip to Montreal, and that's Ivan Demidov, with Corey Pronman and Scott Wheeler of The Athletic doing their annual full 2 rounds mock draft. They have Demidov once again for their second mock draft in a week, landing at number 5 to Montreal. We have to get into all of that. Plus, Jesse, Pierre McGuire said yesterday he believes that the Habs will go, quote, big game hunting in the free agency market this summer. There's a lot to get into, so stick around for this episode of Habs Digest, and we're just going to jump straight into to Pierre McGuire. And my question is this, Jesse, is what could the Habs realistically do? Now, we know Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are going to have to make a solid draft pick. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on with respect to the Habs. But Pierre McGuire seems to think that there's going to be more going on. And while we think maybe trades, well, Pierre's opinion is a bit different. Check this out. He said, I think Montreal is going for bigger fish. Now, the question was about adding Anthony Duclair or Vincent Desharnais. And he said, I think Montreal's looking for bigger fish. And he kind of means that Duclair. They're going big game hunting, I think, Montreal in the offseason. This is very, very interesting, Jesse. He said this on the Sick podcast just yesterday. But here's the thing. When we look at the list of top 20 free agents, sorted by points per game. To me, other than some of the good restricted free agents, you see someone like a Seth Jarvis, Casey Middlestat, and Marty Necas is just off of this list. Is there even an unrestricted free agent here that you would want to give term to? I mean, there's good players like Monahan, like Teravainen, like Gensel, like Reinhart, but I don't want to sign any of these guys who are 28, 29 to long-term deals. I feel like big game hunting in free agency would be a mistake for Montreal.
Don't tease us like this, Pierre. We know that we need some more offensive help, right? But looking at that list, right, like unless we can get like a Marchessault on maybe like a shorter term deal, right? You know, those 42 goals do seem enticing, but it is seeming like maybe a trade is more of the route that we really want to go for rather than free agency. Like we know next year we're going to be getting Lane Hudson. We know that that's going to be helping our offense tremendously. I call it the Lane effect, like not just for him, but also for these other players as well. Like he's going to be a catalyst, a spark plug for our offense. So the way he's going to be able to open up so much for other players on this team as well, right? I think a lot of our players are going to be happy to have him around. Joshua Waugh having a full season of that. I feel like there's an opportunity for that, right? But obviously it's like we have our first line set. Now we need to start working systematically on getting more scoring on our second, third, and even our fourth line, right? We need to take it wherever we can. But the good news is like our defense can score. So that means if we can bring in a guy, you know, that can really light up the lamp, that's going to help this team quite a bit. We know Kirby's going to be back next year. So I feel like we'll have a much better feel of where this team is truly at.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One more year of looking at what this team has, and maybe if that draft pick, whoever they draft, if they play this year, great. If they don't, like Demidov wouldn't be able to, then that's fine too. But you have another year to evaluate your guys, your lane effect, your lane train. You got David Reinbacher, you're still looking at Mailloux, right? Then you can finally get a feel of this is something the team needs in unrestricted free agency. But when I look at that list, I see a bunch of short-term solutions. And while, again, I'm going to bring it up for a third time, you guys can maybe rewind or you can look at it again here. But like Marchessault to me is a short-term solution. Yeah, Quebec guy, whatever, but he's probably not going to accept anything less than a 4 or 5 year deal to bring him into his late 30s. Not something the Habs are going to be interested in almost for sure. Matt Duchene, he's having some great years with Dallas, but he's 33, right? The youngest guy on this list that's a UFA that's good here is Sam Reinhart, who had a 57 goal season, but you know those numbers will go down in Montreal, and without the playmakers that he had in Florida, it's just not going to work. I feel like these are short-term solutions without knowing what the actual window is. And so, Pierre, I'm sorry to say, maybe not so sorry, like, I don't see this happening. But Jesse, one thing I wanted to just throw by before we move into the next topic. You notice how many Carolina Hurricanes are there? You got Jake Gensel, you got Seth Jarvis, you got Teuvo Teravainen, you got Marty Necas. That's actually something Pierre talked about as well. He said, if I'm any team looking for one of these guys, I'm calling Dom Waddell in Carolina. Because we talk a lot about Necas, because we're assuming they're going to re-sign Jarvis, because they absolutely should. But in my mind, it's not a crazy world. Like, they have to let one of, maybe two of, Gensel, Teravainen, Jarvis, and Necas walk. And depending on who they're comfortable internally keeping or sending out, I think maybe even more than Necas, I think Montreal could maybe look at potentially some of these other guys. We were talking about Gensel last year. I don't think it'd be a good idea to sign him to like a 5 or 6 year deal either, but I think there's more opportunities than we might think on the trade market, specifically with Carolina.
We have to expect the unexpected with Kent Hughes. He likes to trick us from time to time. He likes to play with our feelings. No, but he actually knows what's best for this team. But that's honestly a great point you bring up. Like you could look at this great showing from from Nietzsche's in these playoffs, right? And obviously Seth Jarvis had an amazing playoffs as well. So it's like, okay, does maybe that leave where Teravainen? Maybe they end up signing like Nikas, and then it's Teravainen, and that's somebody that's available for us to really sign. But I think it's a great point. You're making up the timeline. I know that there's an amazing free agency class next year. We're talking about Rantanen. We're talking about Draisaitl. So it'd be amazing. Maybe we do the trade this year and then the free agency, once we get money off the books, it's like, oh, and now all these great players are available at the same time, right? What is interesting to note, though, Josh, is like Habs fans are surprisingly warm to the idea of Steven Stamkos somehow making his way to the Montreal Canadiens. Right. And they just added McDonough, right, for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they already had so many guys to re-sign before then. We know there's a history with Stamkos where it's like he wanted to get extended before. It's been going on. There's some drama there, which is weird, right? When it's like the captain of your team. I don't know about you, Josh, though. He just doesn't feel like a Montreal Canadian, like this would happen. I could see a Jonathan Marceau. I could picture that happening. For some reason, I don't really see the Stamkos. Of course, a vet experience, 40 goals, amazing. At some point, adding a vet, if you're looking to be like a Stanley Cup contender, super important. You can't get around that. And we do need more of that on our team, especially guys that can produce. Sean Monahan, shout out to him for his 26 goals this year. Absolutely unreal, right? But we're not quite there yet. I would work on improving our other lines on this team. Once we've then established that, then you kind of bring that vet, you bring that free agent to bring us over the top.
Yeah, Julien Brisebois basically said, hey, even though we got McDonough, we still have enough to sign Stamkos. And that seems to be their plan. And I'm not sure if I insinuated earlier the Habs would trade for Gensler or Teravainen. That's not what I meant. I'm trying to think back. Sometimes I say things that don't make sense. Because, of course, it's just Jarvis and H's that are RFAs. The other two are UFAs. But regardless, someone has to go. But you're very right. Check on what you need this year. Eventually, once you know your timeline, bring in a vet. It's going to be important. I don't know if right now is the time, but like you said, expect the unexpected. There might be something interesting coming up. But speaking of interesting, we got to get into, not that, that was the wrong one. This is the one. This is getting exciting, and we're talking about the mock drafts. And we talk a lot about mock drafts, but we got a nice update for you guys. So we're going to start here with the NHL Mock Draft 2024, predicting all 65 picks of the first two rounds with Pronman and Wheeler. So they do this every single year. And in Corey Pronman's mock draft within the past week, he had Demidov going to Montreal at 5, and Scott Wheeler actually got the pick at 5 for Montreal this time, and he also picked Ivan Demidov. They both said that 3 defensemen were going to go ahead of Montreal's pick, allowing Demidov to slide down to Montreal. And the reason that this is important, we kind of brought this up last time, Jesse, but they do this every year. Like I said, well, what did the mock draft say last year? Well, Scott Wheeler, when he had the chance to pick at 5 for Montreal, he actually picked Ryan Leonard, but Pronman said Reinbacher's going right after. And of course, Montreal ended up not picking Ryan Leonard. But the thing with Corey Pronman is, Jesse, he's been on the Reinbacher train, or he was on the Reinbacher train since May 11th. This was from May 11th of last year, Pronman's mock draft, David Reinbacher, similar to the last one we did. The other mock draft I just showed you that had Montreal taking Ryan Leonard, well, that was from May 23rd of last year. They have a track record of getting these things very close to right. They both say that Demidov is sliding to 5. I know we talk about this a lot, Jesse, but this to me is starting to get, like, I know they don't have the information from the scouts and stuff like they usually do when we get closer to the draft, but they've been on the Habs picks early for the last couple of years. They've had guys that people maybe didn't think were going to go 5 or 6 who ended up actually going 5 or 6. This is going to be more excited every single day.
This is getting unreal. Yeah, we're seeing more mocks now with Demidov at number 5. And this is different. You know, if Demidov is available at number 5, the thing about Matvei Vitkov, he did not want to be a Montreal Canadian. He said to the Philadelphia Flyers, I want to go play for this team. It is a good thing that we didn't draft somebody who didn't want to be here. We've seen in the past, Eric Lindros type situations, almost kind of in reverse here a little bit. Like, we just don't need any of that whatsoever. So if he's available, absolutely, he would be an amazing pick. Evan Demidov for us. I feel like filling that skill, like you could argue like Caufield is just kind of a pure skill guy, but I would say with Demidov, you're getting a little bit of size, but then that elite level skill, just that higher tier, right? So, and again, Kaiden Lindstrom, he reminds me of Slav, and that's a great thing in a lot of ways, right? I don't know, for Josh, who do you prefer? Do you prefer a Kaiden Lindstrom or a Demidov? You have both available at 5. Who are you picking?
I mean, that's actually a tough thing. I'm going to play the highlight reels again. I mean, when we're talking about the number 5 overall pick, if Kaiden Lindstrom is healthy, I find it so hard to turn him down, right? He has that combination of skill, size, poise, everything you could really want from a guy like, there's a lot of stuff that Lindstrom has that you can't teach, but back injuries scare me. When it comes to Demidov, though, it's the lower league that scares me. And while a lot of guys who performed well in the NHL before, like Kirill Kaprizov, like Artemi Panarin, like Nikita Kucherov, these guys end up having great careers. So I shouldn't be as scared of Demidov as I sort of am. Honestly, if all things are equal, you know what? Here's the thing. I was going to say Cayden Lindstrom, but I'm changing my mind on the fly, and here's why. A risk got to be taken at some point. Demidov has the upside to be like a 40-goal, like 80, 90-point guy, right? Maybe even more by some people's accounts. And if you're Montreal, I think you have to take that risk, right? You have to take the risk eventually to get some kind of top-end scoring, which is why, you know, when we talk about this whole timeline thing, like adding players, you know, oh, we got to add someone that fits the timeline. It's not, you're not just going to be able to go out and get a 40-goal guy on the unrestricted free agent market that's young, that fits your timeline, right? In a couple of years, once you know where you are, yeah, sure, but goal scoring is the most valuable asset on the free agency market every year. You don't easily come by that. And while you have someone like a Caufield who's great, someone like a Demidov can immediately be your number one offensive guy within, I'd say, a couple of years if all things pan out correctly. Is it possible that it just never translates and those dangles? Yeah, it's possible. And while I would love to have Lindstrom, I think the potential upside of a guy like Demidov, for me, and I don't know if Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton think the same thing. They're going to have to interview him. There's all kinds of stuff. But for me, with the potential upside of a guy who can be your number one production, like elite level offensive talent, it's almost impossible to trade for that. It's almost impossible to find that on the unrestricted free agency market unless they're quite old and they're asking for a lot of term. To be able to have a guy on a young contract who has that potential, I think you got to take the swing.
Yeah, the pure offense is really what we need. And then you combine that with the fact that he wants to be in Montreal, that he can play a 200-foot game as well. And then for me, it's a win there on Demidov, right? And the fact that at the same levels in the same leagues, he is projecting better than Kucherov and Kaprizov. How do you feel about that, Josh? I know that's wild, right? But like Cayden Lindstrom, though, is, that being said, we would be super happy. And here's why. This is a guy that's going to be tough to play against every night, right? Again, a guy that will do so well in the playoffs when it really matters. And you could argue nothing else matters but playoff performances. This guy is going to do great in those situations. You know, we feel like Demidov could probably do well, but I'm putting money Cayden Lindstrom is going to do amazing playoffs. That being said, still go with Demidov, but like Lindstrom would be hard every night. You know, a skilled forward from another team, top line center. Imagine playing against 200-pound plus Cayden Lindstrom every night, just battling you with that skill. Obviously, that size that would be so welcome on this team as well. But I just want to go for the slam dunk offensively. I feel you need that offensive juggernaut to really take that next level. I just see Demidov as being more of a complete slam dunk offensively, even though I love the complete game from Lindstrom. That's why I'm going for Demidov, just because I feel like not only is he the best player available, but also what we need the most.
Yeah, I agree. Here's the thing. Final thing before we end the show. You can have guys who are playoff style players. You can have a team full of them. But look at these Stanley Cup winners. It's exceedingly rare for them to not have an elite top tier level offensive talent along with those guys, right? You got to pretty much always have one. I mean, Vegas was kind of close, but they still had a Xhekaj. They still had guys putting up, like, look at Marchessault and Stevenson in those playoffs, putting up those elite level numbers. But you need to have an elite level offensive talent if you want to guarantee you're a perennial cup contender. That is what Demidov is. You can fill your team up with big guys who fit that playoff style all you want, but if you can't put goals on the board, as we've seen, you might just not get over that hump. But what do you guys think? Let us know your thoughts down below in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Demidov versus Lindstrom. How excited are you for the fact that Demidov seems to be landing at 5 to Montreal in all these mock drafts? Because I know we are pumped. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoy, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Help us hit 15K subs, because there's still some people there watching right now that haven't hit that sub button. So we'd really appreciate if you did. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.